At my wedding, my parents gave a speech about their successful children and didn't mention me once. The DJ then announced I'd been covering their debt for 5 years. Mom fainted. Dad's face went purple. 3 months ago, my wedding turned into a masterclass in family dysfunction, and I'm still picking shrapnel out of my soul. I'm Brenda, 32, and I just married the most incredible man alive, Jack. But this story isn't about love. It's about how my parents weaponized what should have been my perfect day to remind me I'm their personal bank account. Meet the cast. My parents, Richard and Carol, are suburban peacocks who think success means impressing the neighbors. Dad sells insurance but acts like he runs Goldman Sachs from his strip mall office. Mom moves maybe 3 houses a year, but considers herself the next real estate mogul. They live in a Pinterest fever dream of granite countertops they couldn't afford, matching Honda Pilots replaced like clockwork, and a lawn Dad treats like sacred ground. Then there's Golden Boy Jake, 29, marketing guru at some startup nobody's heard of, driving a leased BMW that costs more than my mortgage, living his best Instagram life in a downtown loft. Every family dinner is the Jake Show. Did you see Jake's promotion? Jake's girlfriend is so lovely. Jake's revolutionizing digital landscapes. Princess Emma, 26, just graduated from an overpriced private college with a communications degree, which apparently qualifies her to find herself while living rent-free at home. She works part-time at a boutique selling $200 candles, calling it her career exploration phase. Everything Emma touches turns to artistic gold, even when she's literally folding aromatherapy products. And me? I'm the invisible middle child who somehow became everyone's financial lifeline. I work logistics for a regional shipping company. Not glamorous, but I coordinate the stuff that keeps the world moving. I make $95,000 keeping goods flowing from A to B. Live in a modest house with a 7-year-old F-150, and apparently that makes me the family's designated ATM. Growing up, love was transactional. Jake got attention for charm, Emma for sensitivity. And me? I got noticed when I was useful. The low-maintenance kid they could safely ignore until they needed something. High school was a masterpiece of neglect. Jake, star quarterback. Emma, theater darling. Me, honor roll student whose games nobody attended. I learned early that steady doesn't get applause, but it sure gets exploitation. College saved me. Studying supply chain management while working part-time jobs. Jake and Emma never needed. I graduated with honors and landed a job 3 weeks later, while Jake partied through business school on mom and dad's dime and Emma collected participation trophies. But 5 years ago, right around Jake's senior year, everything changed. That's when my parents' house of financial cards started tumbling, though it took months to realize just how spectacularly they'd screwed themselves. And somehow, guess who became responsible for cleaning up their mess? The wedding was supposed to be my day. Instead, it became the moment I finally understood I wasn't their daughter. I was their exit strategy. It started with Dad's midlife crisis investment phase. He'd always been a sucker for get-rich-quick schemes. But this was different. He started hanging around with guys from his insurance office, all convinced they'd strike it rich in cryptocurrency and house flipping. First came Bitcoin when it was riding high. $15,000 they didn't have, convinced it would make them millionaires. Then a buddy's house-flipping venture guaranteed to double their money in 6 months. Another $20,000 vanished. When those predictably went south, instead of cutting losses, they doubled down. More crypto, sketchy business loans, even some MLM thing that promised to make mom a boss babe entrepreneur. By the time they admitted there was a problem, they were $47,000 in credit card debt across 6 different cards, with interest rates that would make loan sharks blush. The call came on a Tuesday night in October. Mom's name on caller ID. Unusual since she typically texted unless someone was dying. "Brenda, sweetie, are you busy?" Her voice had that fake bright quality she used when hiding something. 20 minutes later, I was at their expensive dining room table, bought on credit, naturally, staring at the carnage. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, spread out like war plans. Dad was clearing his throat nervously while Mom fidgeted with her wedding ring. They looked like kids caught shoplifting. "We're in a bit of a financial bind," Dad said, his insurance salesman voice cracking. "A bit of a bind, right?" They spent an hour explaining their investments, how they'd tried digging out by taking cash advances, only making things worse, how bankruptcy would destroy their credit forever. "We don't want to burden you kids," Mom said, voice cracking, "but we need to act fast." Here's the thing. They didn't call a family meeting, didn't ask Jake or Emma for help, just me. Because I was the only one with savings, good credit, and the stability to bail them out. Jake was maxing his own cards, maintaining his lifestyle. Emma was still in college on their dime. But me? I was responsible. They knew I'd fix it, because that's what I always did. "How much?" I asked, dreading the answer. $50,000 would cover everything, Dad said. I should have said no. Should have told them to file bankruptcy and face consequences. Instead, I did what I always did. I fixed their problem. That weekend, I took out a $50,000 personal loan. They cried when I transferred the money, calling me their hero daughter. That feeling lasted until their next financial emergency. 6 months later, roof repairs. Insurance won't cover it all. Another $8,000. Dad's car transmission. "I need it for work, sweetheart." Another $4,500. Emma's senior year. Student loan fell through. Another $15,000. Jake's engagement party. First impressions matter. Another $7,000. Jake's wedding. We want him to have the perfect day. Another $12,000. Every single time it was temporary. Every time they'd pay me back once they sorted their finances. Every time I transferred money, because that's what family does. I kept a spreadsheet. Call me obsessive. The original $50,000 plus all subsequent emergencies plus interest I was paying on loans to cover their expenses. Total loaned over 5 years, $127,000. Amount they'd paid back, $0. Not a single payment, not even $50 to show good faith. But it gets better. Every month I'd get chatty calls from Mom, updating me on their lives. New furniture, Florida vacations, Dad's golf clubs, Emma's Europe trip, Jake's expensive condo housewarming. They were living better than ever while I made payments on loans that funded their lifestyle. At family gatherings, I got to hear them brag about Jake's marketing success and Emma's bright communications future. When people asked what I did, Dad would wave dismissively. "Brenda works in shipping. Very reliable job. Like I was a postal worker." Jake's campaigns fascinated everyone. Emma's job search brought suggestions and connections. When I mentioned my work, conversation moved on within minutes. I was the family's financial backbone, but might as well have been invisible. They'd reframed our relationship completely. I wasn't the daughter who'd save them from bankruptcy. I was just Brenda, the responsible one, doing fine on her own. The money wasn't a sacrifice. It was just what I did because I was stable. They'd convinced themselves I owed them this support. After all, they'd raised me, fed me, put me through college, with my scholarship and jobs. But who's counting? Except they'd given me nothing but the opportunity to pay for their mistakes. Enter Jack, whom I met at a logistics conference 3 years ago. He was making sarcastic comments under his breath during a boring warehouse optimization presentation, and I knew I wanted to get to know him better. He's brilliant, one of the youngest supply chain directors at his company, and funny in that sharp, no way that cuts through pretense like a knife way. Zero tolerance for manipulation or dishonesty. When I told him about my family's financial situation around month 3, his reaction was immediate. "Wait, let me get this straight," he said, setting down his coffee. "You've loaned them over $100,000. They've never paid back a penny, and they don't even acknowledge what you've done?" "It's complicated," I said, my default response. "No, it's not complicated. You're their daughter, not their bank." Jack grew up working class, where everyone contributed according to their means, and help was acknowledged, appreciated, and reciprocated. The idea of parents systematically exploiting their child's generosity while treating her like an afterthought was foreign to him. "This isn't normal, Brenda. Healthy families don't work this way." When we got engaged after 2 years, Jack wanted a simple wedding. "I don't need a big production. I just want to marry you and have people we love witness it." My parents had other ideas. I mentioned our venue choice, a nice community center with a beautiful garden for 75 people. Reasonable rental, perfect space, manageable costs. Mom's reaction was horrified. "You can't have your reception at a community center, Brenda. What will people think? This is our daughter's wedding." Suddenly, it was their daughter's wedding. They pushed for bigger venues, better caterers, open bars, upgraded everything. "We'll help pay for it," Dad promised. "We want this to be special." I should have known better, but I tried keeping peace. We compromised on a historic inn with a beautiful ballroom, elegant without being ostentatious. Final budget $28,000. More than initially planned, but reasonable. 2 weeks before the wedding, guess who came knocking? Brenda, we need to talk, Dad said apologetically. Dad's commission check didn't come through, Mom explained when I went over. The sale fell through, and now they were in a tight spot, their favorite phrase for explaining unmet obligations. We can't contribute as much as we wanted to. As much as they wanted to, they hadn't contributed anything yet. Everything required advance payment. How much can you actually cover? I asked. Well, we can probably manage about $2,000, Mom said. Maybe $3,000 if we stretch and put it on the credit card. $3,000 for a wedding. They'd insisted on upgrading from $12,000 to $28,000. Jack was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher with enough force to suggest he was imagining my parents' heads. When they left, he gave me that look. Let me guess. They want you to cover the difference. Of course they did. And like an idiot, I agreed, transferring money to cover almost the entire wedding cost. This is the last time, I told Jack. After the wedding, I'm done being their financial backup plan. He just looked at me with knowing eyes that said he'd heard that promise before. The rehearsal dinner should have been perfect, both families celebrating together. Instead, it was a preview of coming humiliation. My parents held court, schmoozing with Jack's family. Dad told his favorite insurance sales stories, while Mom complimented everyone in sight. Brenda has always been so good with money, Dad told Jack's construction company owner father, gesturing with his wine glass. Very responsible, very practical, not like her siblings. They're more the creative types. I nearly choked. Responsible with money. The guy bankrolling their lifestyle was responsible, while they were the creative types too special for financial stability. Jake spent the evening making his marketing project sound revolutionary. Emma entertained everyone with job search stories about holding out for the perfect opportunity. When Jack's dad asked about my logistics work, the conversation lasted 3 minutes before Dad steered back to Jake's achievements or Emma's bright future. That night in our hotel room, Jack was unusually quiet. You okay? I asked. I'm thinking about what your dad said at dinner, he replied. He called you responsible with money while sitting at a table you paid for, talking about a wedding you're funding, wearing a suit you bought him. He turned to face me in the dark. Do you realize they've never once acknowledged what you've done for them? I did realize it. I just hadn't let myself think about it because it hurt too much. The wedding day itself started perfectly. The weather cooperated. Clear skies, mild temperature, gentle breeze. The venue looked incredible with the flowers we'd chosen. The garden was in full bloom and everything was falling into place exactly as planned. Jack looked absolutely radiant in his suit. We'd found it at a clearance sale 6 months earlier. Nothing extravagant, just a simple, elegant design that made him look like something out of a movie. When I saw him standing at the altar, everything else faded away. All the family drama, all the financial stress, all the years of feeling invisible, none of it mattered in that moment. The ceremony was perfect. We'd written our own vows, and when Jack promised to always see me, always value me, always stand by me, I felt like maybe I'd found the family I'd been looking for all along. We kissed, everyone cheered, and we headed to the reception, feeling like nothing could touch us. The inn's ballroom had been transformed into something magical. White lights strung from the ceiling, candles on every table, and flowers everywhere. The upgraded arrangements Mom had insisted on, naturally. The DJ, Mike, was professional and charming, keeping the energy up while staying out of the way. Everything was going exactly as planned. Dinner was excellent. We'd chosen a local caterer known for their quality, and the food was worth every penny of the premium we'd paid. The cake was beautiful, the bar was well stocked, and our guests seemed to be having a wonderful time. Then came time for the speeches. Jack's father went first, as tradition dictates. Tom stood up with his whiskey in hand and delivered the kind of toast that every father of the groom should give. He talked about watching Jack grow up, about his strength and intelligence, about how proud he was of the man he'd become. He welcomed me into their family with genuine warmth, telling everyone that he couldn't have asked for a better daughter-in-law. Jack's always been able to see through bullshit, he said, which got a laugh from everyone who knew him. So, when he told me he'd found someone special, I knew she had to be the real deal. Brenda, welcome to the family. We're lucky to have you. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was exactly the kind of speech I'd always imagined a father giving at his child's wedding. Proud, loving, genuine. Then it was my father's turn. Dad stood up, straightened his tie. the one from the expensive suit I'd bought him for the occasion, and tapped his champagne glass with a knife. The room quieted down, and he waited for everyone's attention with the practiced timing of someone who'd given plenty of presentations in his career. He looked around the room, smiling at familiar faces, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. "Carol and I are so proud to be here today, celebrating this wonderful occasion," he began, his voice carrying that smooth, professional tone he used for client presentations. "When you raise children, you hope and pray they'll grow up to be successful, productive members of society." So far, so good. Standard father of the bride material. Well, I can tell you that Carol and I have been truly blessed in that regard. We have raised children who have exceeded our every expectation. My stomach started to drop. I knew that tone. I knew where this was going. Our son Jake has built an impressive career in digital marketing, working with major brands and developing strategies that have generated millions in revenue for his company. Just last year, he gave us the beautiful wedding that brought his lovely wife, Amanda, into our family. The room was listening politely, waiting for him to get to the part about me. You know, the bride, the person whose wedding this was supposed to be. And our daughter Emma, well, she's just at the beginning of what I know will be an incredible journey. She's got a degree in communications from one of the finest private colleges in the state, and she's already making waves in the creative industry. The sky is the limit for that girl. He paused, looking around the room with obvious pride, soaking up the attention. Carol and I couldn't be prouder of our successful children. They've made us the luckiest parents in the world. And then he raised his glass with a flourish. To Brenda and Jack. That was it. That was the entire speech. He talked about Jake's career success, Emma's bright future, their successful children, plural, without mentioning a single thing about me except my name at the very end, like an afterthought. The room was confused. I could see people looking around, murmuring to each other, wondering if he was finished. Jack's hand found mine under the table and squeezed so hard it almost hurt. His face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. Not for himself, but for me. Then my mother stood up to add her contribution. "We're just so happy that Brenda found someone willing to take care of her," she said with a laugh that sounded forced even to my ears. "We always worried she'd end up alone since she's so focused on work all the time. But Jack seems like such a practical, sensible man, perfect for someone like Brenda. Someone willing to take care of me, like I was some kind of charity case who'd been lucky to find anyone at all." The applause that followed was polite but confused. People weren't sure what they'd just witnessed, but they could sense something was off. Jack's family looked uncomfortable. My coworkers were exchanging glances. Even some of my extended family members seemed puzzled by the lukewarm, backhanded nature of my parents' toast. I sat there trying to keep my expression neutral, while inside I was burning. $127,000. 5 years of bailing them out of every crisis. A wedding I'd paid for almost entirely myself, including the clothes they were wearing and the food they were eating. And this was how they saw me, as the boring workaholic daughter who'd gotten lucky in love. Mike, the DJ, seemed to sense something was wrong. He was a consummate professional, the kind of guy who'd probably seen every variety of family dysfunction at wedding receptions, and he could read a room better than most therapists. He approached our table during the confused applause that followed my mother's speech. "Everything okay over here?" he asked quietly, leaning down so only Jack and I could hear him. "Would you like to say something? Share some words about your family?" That's when Jack looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry, not sad, but something else entirely. Determined, protective, done. "Actually," he said loud enough for Mike to hear clearly, "there's something important the guests should know about Brenda, about what kind of woman they're celebrating tonight." Mike nodded and handed him the microphone without hesitation. Jack stood up slowly and the room quieted down again. He looked strong and fierce, like an avenging angel in a perfectly tailored suit. I had no idea what he was about to do, but I could see in his eyes that whatever it was, there would be no going back from it. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Before we continue with the celebration, I think there are some things you should know about the woman I just married, things that apparently got left out of the previous speeches." He turned to look at me, and I saw nothing but love and fierce protection in his eyes. Then he turned back to the crowd. 5 years ago, when Brenda's parents faced serious financial difficulties, $47,000 in credit card debt, Brenda took out a personal loan for $50,000 to pay off their debt completely. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask for collateral or a payment plan. She just helped her family because that's who she is. I felt the blood drain from my face. He wasn't supposed to know the exact numbers. I'd been vague about the amounts, but apparently Jack had been paying closer attention than I realized. Over the past 5 years, Jack continued, his voice getting stronger, Brenda has given her parents a total of $127,000. She's paid for roof repairs, car repairs, college tuition, engagement parties, and even helped fund her brother Jake's wedding last year. The room was absolutely silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. My parents looked like deer caught in headlights, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. And in all that time, 5 full years, her parents haven't paid back a single dollar. Not one payment, not even a token amount to show good faith. Mom's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silent room. Brenda paid for this wedding almost entirely by herself, Jack continued, including the venue her parents insisted on upgrading, the flowers they said were necessary, and even the suits and dress they're wearing tonight. Dad's face was turning that familiar shade of purple I remembered from my childhood, the color he turned when something happened that he couldn't control or manipulate his way out of. So when I hear speeches about successful children, Jack said, his voice carrying just a hint of steel now, I want everyone to know that the most successful person at this table, the most generous, the most loyal, the most selfless, is the woman sitting right here. The one who works hard, saves her money, and takes care of her family without expecting recognition, appreciation, or even basic acknowledgement. He handed the microphone back to Mike and sat down. The applause that followed wasn't polite wedding applause. It was thunderous. People were standing now, cheering, raising their glasses. Jack's family was clapping and shouting approval. My coworkers were nodding with respect and understanding. Even some of my extended family members looked impressed and perhaps a little ashamed. But my parents, Dad looked like he was about to have a stroke, his face cycling through every shade of red and purple in the spectrum. Mom had gone completely pale and was swaying slightly in her chair. Then Mike, bless his professional soul, decided to add his own commentary to the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced into the microphone, let's hear it for Brenda, the woman who proves that real success isn't about what you achieve for yourself. It's about how you lift up the people around you. The crowd erupted again, even louder this time. People were on their feet, shouting congratulations, raising their glasses in toasts that felt genuine and heartfelt in a way my parents' speech never had. I saw several of my parents' friends looking at them with raised eyebrows, clearly doing mental math and reaching uncomfortable conclusions. That's when Mom fainted. She just toppled backward off her chair like a tree falling, landing on the hardwood floor with a thud that somehow managed to be audible over the applause and cheering. Her champagne glass flew out of her hand, spraying the nearby guests with Dom Perignon and adding to the chaos. Dad's purple face went white in an instant as he dropped to his knees beside her, his own glass shattering as it hit the floor. Call 911, he shouted, though it was completely unnecessary. Mom was already coming around, her eyes fluttering open as the applause died down and people crowded around to help. I'm okay, she mumbled, trying to sit up and failing. The room got very hot. The EMTs arrived about 10 minutes later, right as Mom was fully conscious and protesting that she didn't need medical attention. They checked her vitals, asked about her medical history, and determined that she'd fainted from shock and embarrassment rather than any underlying medical condition. Blood pressure's a little elevated, but that's probably from stress, the lead EMT explained to Dad. She should be fine, but I'd recommend she take it easy for the rest of the evening. The damage, however, was already done. The entire reception, 100 guests, including family, friends, co-workers, and business associates, had witnessed the family's financial benefactor watch her mother collapse after being publicly exposed as ungrateful and manipulative. Jack's father approached our table while the EMTs were packing up their equipment. Brenda, he said quietly, putting a firm hand on my shoulder, I want you to know that if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me first. That display was the most shameful thing I've ever witnessed at a family gathering. Jack's mother was more direct. She walked straight up to my mother, who was sitting in a folding chair, sipping water and trying to recover her composure. You should be ashamed of yourself, she said in a voice that carried just far enough for the nearby tables to hear. That girl has been supporting your family for years, and you couldn't even mention her name in a speech at her own wedding. But one of my aunts, Dad's sister Patricia, who'd always been the most straightforward person in our extended family, came over to our table once the EMT excitement had died down. "Brenda," she said, "I had no idea you'd been helping them out financially. Richard never mentioned it. If I'd known—" She shook her head. "I'm proud of you. Your parents raised a good woman, even if they don't seem to realize it." The rest of the reception was, well, surreal would be the best word for it. My parents left early, Dad helping Mom to their car while she claimed she needed to rest and recover from her episode. Jake and Emma tried to act like nothing had happened, making awkward conversation with other guests and desperately trying to change the subject whenever anyone brought up Jack's revelations. But the story had legs. People wanted details. They wanted to know if the numbers Jack had mentioned were accurate, how long this had been going on, why my parents had never acknowledged my help. Several of Dad's business associates cornered him before he could escape, asking pointed questions about family finances and obligations. Jake's wife, Amanda, looked mortified when she realized that her wedding the previous year had been partially funded by her sister-in-law's generosity, not her in-laws' financial success. Emma kept shooting me confused looks, like she was trying to figure out if she should be grateful or angry. I spent most of the rest of the reception answering questions and accepting congratulations, not for getting married, which was supposed to be the point of the evening, but for being a dedicated daughter and sister who'd quietly supported her family for years. The weirdest part was how many people told me they'd suspected something like this was going on. My dad's brother mentioned that he'd always wondered how my parents could afford their lifestyle on Dad's income. One of Mom's coworkers said she thought it was strange that they never seemed worried about money, despite Dad's occasional complaints about slow sales periods. "We just figured Richard had made some good investments, she said. "We never imagined." Jack and I finally got a few minutes alone around 10 p.m. After the cake cutting and most of the formal reception activities, we stepped outside onto the inn's garden patio, where string lights created a romantic atmosphere that felt incongruous with the evening's drama. "Any regrets?" he asked, slipping his hand into mine. I thought about it for a moment. The humiliation, the family crisis, the awkwardness that would probably follow us for years. Then I thought about 5 years of being taken for granted, of watching my parents praise their other children while treating me like a walking ATM. "Only one," I said. "I should have done it myself years ago." We left for our honeymoon in Tuscany the next morning, and for 2 wonderful weeks we drank wine, ate incredible food, explored medieval villages, and didn't think about family drama once. It was exactly the reset we needed. Time to focus on being newlyweds instead of the children of dysfunctional parents. When we got back, reality was waiting for us like a patient predator. My voicemail was full. Text messages crowded my phone. Emails filled my inbox. The wedding revelations had apparently dominated my family's life for the entire 2 weeks we were gone. "Dad, we need to talk immediately. What Jack did was completely inappropriate and has caused serious problems in the family." Jake: "Sis, why didn't you ever tell me about the money situation? I feel like an ass." Emma: "Are you seriously trying to make Mom and Dad look bad at your own wedding? That was so selfish." Mom: "I'm still recovering from the embarrassment. How could you let him humiliate us like that in front of everyone?" Extended family members had opinions too. Some were supportive, others were critical, and a few seemed to be enjoying the drama more than they should have been. But the most interesting messages came from my parents' social circle, the people they'd been trying so hard to impress for all these years. Apparently, the story had spread through their suburban bubble like wildfire. Richard and Carol, the couple who were always bragging about their successful children and their comfortable lifestyle, had been exposed as financially dependent on the daughter they never mentioned. My dad's insurance office was buzzing with gossip. How much money had Brenda really loaned them? Was it true they'd never paid her back? What about Jake's wedding? Had Brenda paid for that too? Mom's real estate office was no better. Her coworkers had been at the wedding, had heard Jack's speech firsthand. They were asking pointed questions about family dynamics and financial arrangements that my mother couldn't deflect with her usual social graces. Their country club friends, their church group, their neighborhood social network, everyone wanted to know more about the family financial situation that had been so dramatically revealed. The most telling response came from my dad's brother, Uncle David, who called me directly instead of going through my parents. "Brenda," he said, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea what you'd been doing for them. If I'd known, I would have said something years ago. What happened at your wedding?" "Well, they brought that on themselves." He went on to explain that he'd suspected something was off with my parents' finances for a while. They lived beyond what Dad's income should have supported. never seemed worried about money, despite periodic complaints about slow business, and had been vague about how they'd recovered from their financial troubles a few years back. "I thought maybe Richard had made some good investments he didn't want to talk about," David said. "I never imagined he was borrowing from his own daughter." But the real bomb dropped when I decided to do some research into their actual financial situation. Remember how I'd been keeping a detailed spreadsheet of everything I'd loaned them? Well, it occurred to me during our honeymoon that I'd never actually verified their financial claims. I'd taken their word for it when they said they were broke, struggling, living paycheck to paycheck. So, I did what any person with access to financial databases would do. I looked up their public records. Property records showed they'd refinanced their house twice in the past 5 years, pulling out equity both times. The first refinance had happened about 6 months after I'd paid off their credit card debt. They'd taken out $35,000 in cash, supposedly for home improvements. The second refinance, 2 years later, had netted them another $28,000. Vehicle records showed they owned both of their Honda Pilots outright. No car loans, both titles clear. Dad's newer Pilot had been purchased with cash in 2019, right around the time I'd covered Emma's tuition shortfall. I also had access through my work's financial services partnership to request credit reports for debt verification purposes. What I found made my blood pressure spike. They had excellent credit. Not just good, excellent credit scores in the high 700s. No late payments. No outstanding balances on any credit cards. They were approved for credit limits that totaled more than my annual salary. In other words, they weren't broke. They weren't struggling. They had been using my money to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford while building up their own savings and home equity. The final piece of the puzzle came when I drove past their house one afternoon and saw a new Lexus SUV in the driveway. A quick online check showed it was this year's model, starting price around $55,000. They'd been crying poverty while making luxury purchases. I called my dad and told him we needed to meet, all of us. We met at a Starbucks near their house, neutral ground where they couldn't control the environment or the conversation. Mom looked nervous, Dad was defensive, and I was done with their lies. "I did some research," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "Interesting what you can find in public records." Dad opened the folder and his face went ashen. Inside were copies of their property records showing the refinancing, vehicle registration records showing the paid-off cars, and credit reports showing their excellent financial standing. "You've been lying to me for 5 years," I said calmly. "You're not broke. You're not struggling. You've been using me as your personal bank while building up your own assets." Mom started the waterworks immediately. "Brenda, we can explain." "Explain what? That you've been running a con on your own daughter?" Dad tried to take control of the conversation using his salesman voice. "Now hold on. We never asked you to give us that money. You offered to help when we were in trouble." "I offered to help with genuine emergencies. I didn't offer to subsidize your lifestyle while you lied about your financial situation." I leaned forward, keeping my voice level but letting the steel show through. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 30 days to start paying me back. I want a written payment plan with a realistic timeline and market rate interest." "We can't afford," Mom began. "Then sell something. Downsize the house. Get rid of the Lexus. Liquidate some of that home equity you've been building. Figure it out." Dad's face was turning purple again, the way it had at the wedding. "You can't be serious. We're family. Family doesn't charge interest to family. Family also doesn't lie, cheat, and steal from each other," I replied. But apparently, I'm the only one who got that memo. I stood up and put on my jacket. 30 days. If I don't hear from you with a concrete repayment plan, I'm taking legal action to recover the debt. Dad's voice was shaking with rage. "You'd sue your own parents over money?" I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd raised me but never really seen me, who'd taken my generosity for granted while treating me like an afterthought. "Try me," I said, and walked out. The payment plan never came. Instead, I got a series of increasingly desperate phone calls and messages. Jake called to tell me I was being unreasonable. "They're getting old, sis. They can't handle this kind of stress. Can't you just work something out?" Emma was more direct in her criticism. "You're tearing this family apart over money. Is that really what's important to you, making Mom and Dad suffer?" Even some extended family members tried to play mediator. "Surely you can come to some kind of understanding," they said. "They're embarrassed enough. Do you really need to make it worse?" The answer was yes. I did need to make it worse, because embarrassment isn't the same as accountability. And I was done being the family's financial safety net. 3 months after the wedding, I filed a civil lawsuit to recover the debt. It became a matter of public record, which meant their entire social circle could look up the case details and see exactly how much money they owed their daughter and how they'd refused to pay it back. The house went up for sale 2 weeks after they were served with the papers. Jake and Emma both tried to intervene then, calling to ask if I'd drop the lawsuit if they started making token payments. Too little, too late, I told them. You've had 5 years to notice what was happening and 5 months since the wedding to make things right. I'm not interested in token payments or family negotiations. I want my money back with interest according to the legal judgment. If they can't afford that, they should have thought about it before they spent 5 years lying to me. The legal process took about 6 months. During that time, my parents sold their house and moved into a smaller condo. Dad traded the Lexus for a used Honda. Mom had to give up her part-time real estate job to focus on the stress of the lawsuit. Their social standing in the community was destroyed. Everyone knew about the family financial scandal now. It had been covered in the local paper's legal notices section, and gossip travels fast in suburban circles. The final judgment was for $127,000, plus interest and legal fees, totaling just over $140,000. The court ordered them to pay it back over 5 years with monthly installments of $2,800. They've been making the payments religiously ever since. Apparently, court-ordered debt is different from family obligations. As for the rest of the family dynamics, well, those have been permanently altered. Jake and Emma have both tried to maintain relationships with me, but it's awkward. They feel guilty about benefiting from money that came out of my pocket, but they're also resentful that I destroyed the family harmony. Jake's wife, Amanda, refuses to speak to me, apparently blaming me for the family drama that's made holiday gatherings uncomfortable. My extended family is split. Some relatives think I was justified in demanding repayment and holding my parents accountable. Others think I went too far by making it a legal matter and humiliating them publicly. I don't really care what they think anymore. For the first time in my life, I'm not defined by what my parents need from me. I'm defined by what I choose for myself. Jack and I are building a life together, free from the constant drain of my parents' financial chaos. When I look back at that wedding day now, I don't just see humiliation, I see liberation. The day my parents exposed themselves for who they really were, and the day I finally decided to stop letting them write my story. For years, I thought being the responsible one meant carrying everyone else's burdens. But responsibility without boundaries isn't virtue, it's a trap. My parents still try sometimes. Small comments slipped into conversations. If only we had a little more help with, or if things were just a bit easier financially. But now, I just smile politely and change the subject. Because Brenda, the invisible daughter, the family's personal bank account, is gone. And Brenda, the woman who took her life back, is here to stay.